The day Daniel Reeves lost everything, the sky itself seemed to tremble. He was halfway down Maple Street, a thin envelope still crushed in his trembling hand, when the thunder began. At first, he thought it was a storm rolling in without warning, but the clouds were clear. The sun hung bright and indifferent above the small-town hospital where he had given 15 years of his life. Then the air started shaking, windows rattled, birds scattered, and two black helicopters descended from the sky, blades slicing the afternoon into chaos. They didn't land at the hospital. They landed in the empty field right in front of him. Men in dark uniforms jumped out before the dust even settled, scanning the street like soldiers in a war zone. One of them shouted at the top of his lungs, his voice breaking with urgency. "Where's the doctor?" Daniel froze. Just minutes earlier, he had been told he was no longer one. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness and second chances, and in the idea that no good deed is ever truly wasted, take a moment right now to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us why humanity still matters. Daniel Reeves was not a man who expected helicopters to look for him. He was a widowed single father of a 7-year-old girl named Lily, a pediatric surgeon who had spent most of his career putting children back together while quietly breaking inside. His wife, Emma, had died in a car accident 5 years earlier, leaving him to learn how to braid hair, pack school lunches, and explain to a little girl why mommy wasn't coming home. He had managed, barely. He worked double shifts. He slept in his office some nights. He missed birthdays and school plays, hating himself for it. But every time he held a child's tiny hand in the operating room and watched their breathing stabilize, he reminded himself it was worth it. Until that morning. A new hospital director had taken over 3 months earlier, focused on profit margins and efficiency. Daniel had argued in meetings that medicine was not a business spreadsheet. He refused to discharge a child early just to free up a bed. He insisted on extra tests for a boy whose insurance wouldn't cover them. The conflict had been simmering. That morning it boiled. He was called into the office and told his approach was outdated. He was accused of overspending, of being emotionally compromised. They said the hospital needed doctors who could adapt. His termination was effective immediately, 15 years. Gone in 15 minutes. He walked out carrying a cardboard box with a framed photo of Lily, a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest dad," and the stethoscope Emma had given him when he graduated. The nurses avoided his eyes. A few hugged him quickly, whispering apologies. But apologies didn't pay rent. By the time he reached Maple Street, the weight of the future was crushing him. He had a mortgage, he had tuition fees, he had a little girl who thought her father could fix anything. And then the sky exploded with rotor blades. The men rushing toward him looked frantic. One of them grabbed his shoulders without hesitation and asked if he was Dr. Daniel Reeves. He nodded, confused, heart racing. The man exhaled like he'd found oxygen in a vacuum and said they had been searching for him everywhere. A private jet had landed at the regional airport 30 minutes earlier. On board was the son of one of the most powerful families in the country. The boy was 8 years old and had suffered a catastrophic internal injury during a vacation accident. The nearest trauma center had refused the case, saying they lacked a specialist capable of performing the rare procedure required. But someone had mentioned Daniel's name. They said there was only one surgeon within 100 miles who had successfully completed that surgery multiple times. The problem was when they called the hospital, they were told he no longer worked there. The helicopters were their solution. Daniel felt the world tilt. He had just been fired for being too emotional. Now strangers were begging him to save a child's life. There was no time for bitterness, no time for pride. The boy was bleeding internally and every minute mattered. The men explained they had secured emergency access to a private surgical wing at a nearby facility. They had brought equipment, staff, everything he would need. They just needed him. For a second, Daniel hesitated, not because he doubted his ability, but because he doubted himself. He had just been told he wasn't good enough. Then he saw Lily's face in his mind. He agreed. As the helicopter lifted him off the ground he had been walking in defeat just moments before, Daniel felt something shift inside him. The town shrank beneath them. His problems didn't disappear, but they became background noise to a single, clear mission: save the child. The private facility was a whirlwind of motion. Nurses moved with precision. Machines beeped urgently. The boy lay pale and still on the operating table, his small chest rising shallowly. His mother stood behind a glass partition, hands pressed against it, her face a mask of terror. She looked like any other mother in that moment. Not powerful, not wealthy, just afraid. Daniel scrubbed in, the familiar ritual grounding him. As he stepped into the operating room, everything else faded. The accusations, the termination letter, the fear of unemployment. All that existed was the child in front of him. The surgery was brutal. The internal damage was worse than described. Blood loss was significant. At one point, the boy's heart rate plummeted so sharply that the entire room seemed to stop breathing. Daniel's hands never shook, but his heart pounded like a drum. He moved with instinct and experience, guiding his team calmly through each crisis. Hours passed. Outside, the sun dipped toward the horizon. Inside, sweat soaked through Daniel's scrubs. He thought of Emma, how she used to tell him that his hands were steadier than anyone she'd ever known. He thought of Lily waiting at home, probably wondering why Daddy wasn't back yet. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime compressed into a single afternoon, the bleeding was controlled, the damaged tissue repaired, the boy's heart stabilized into a steady rhythm. Daniel stepped back. It was done. When he walked out to the waiting area, the mother rushed toward him. She searched his face before he even spoke. When he told her son was alive and stable, she collapsed into tears, gripping his hands as if they were the only solid thing left in her world. Word spread quickly. By morning, news outlets were reporting how a recently dismissed small-town surgeon had been airlifted to save the life of a billionaire's child. The irony was too sharp to ignore. Social media exploded with outrage over his firing. Former patients shared stories of his compassion. Nurses spoke anonymously about the director's cost-cutting measures. Daniel, meanwhile, sat at his kitchen table in the early hours, staring at Lily as she slept on the couch. He had picked her up late from a neighbor's house, too exhausted to explain everything. He felt relief, gratitude, and a quiet, stubborn sadness. He still didn't have a job. The next day, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. Offers came from hospitals in neighboring cities. Some came with significant salary increases. Others promised him full control over pediatric surgical protocols. The hospital that fired him issued a carefully worded statement about administrative restructuring. Then something unexpected happened. The family of the boy he saved requested a private meeting. They arrived not with helicopters this time, but with humility. The father, a man whose name was attached to skyscrapers and corporations, thanked Daniel in a voice that trembled despite his wealth. He said no amount of money could repay what had been done, but he wanted to try in a way that mattered. He offered to fund a pediatric surgical center in Daniel's town, fully equipped, no compromises on patient care, no early discharges for profit, a place where children from any background could receive the best treatment without their parents fearing bankruptcy. He wanted Daniel to lead it. The offer wasn't just a job, it was a mission. Daniel asked for one day to think. That night he sat with Lily on the porch. She listened with wide eyes as he explained that Daddy might get to build a hospital just for kids. She asked if it meant he would still tuck her in at night. He promised he would. In that quiet moment, he realized something profound. Being fired had felt like the end, but it had forced him into the exact place he needed to be when that helicopter came searching. If he had still been in surgery at the hospital, if he had left through a different exit, if he had delayed even 5 minutes, the outcome might have been different. Sometimes life doesn't push us down to punish us. Sometimes it repositions us for something greater. Daniel accepted the offer. Construction began within months. The new center wasn't just a building, it was a symbol. Nurses who had once whispered apologies now walked its halls proudly. Families traveled from distant towns seeking care. Lily decorated one of the waiting room walls with drawings of superheroes in scrubs. On the day the center officially opened, Daniel stood at the entrance watching children run through doors that represented hope rather than fear. He felt Emma's absence deeply, but he also felt her presence in every decision he made. He was no longer just a doctor trying to survive hospital politics. He was a father building a legacy of compassion. And as he looked up at the clear sky above the town, he couldn't help but remember the sound of those helicopters. What had felt like chaos had been opportunity in disguise. If this story moved you even a little, if it reminded you that setbacks can become setups for miracles, please take a moment now to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe for more stories that restore faith in humanity. And before this story ends, I have one special request for you. Comment the word hope below if you believe that even the darkest days can lead to brighter futures. Daniel's life didn't become perfect overnight. There were long hours, difficult cases, moments of doubt. But every time he heard the laughter of a child leaving the center healthy, he knew the path had been worth it. He had walked home fired and defeated. He had risen into the sky uncertain and afraid. And he had landed not just as a doctor, but as proof that sometimes, when the world seems to strip everything away, it is only making room for something far greater than we ever imagined. In the end, it wasn't the helicopters that changed his life. It was the courage to step into them.